this is the AI safety reading group. So I guess we should probably just have a bit more of a casual chat because it's just the two of us, at least for now. So yeah, what were your impressions of the reading?
I thought Bostrom is plagiarizing Omohundro, and he adds this one extra bit, which is the orthogonality, but the rest is basically just a riff on Omohundro's paper, which he references, but he's like, Omohundro got this started, which is such a... Yeah, yeah, I'm not impressed by this paper. And now that this paper is like one chapter of his book, so actually it lowers my opinion of his book, to be honest.
Okay, that's interesting. I thought that this was like that Bostrom put it better.
Oh yeah, it's better. It's better. It's clearer.
Yeah.
But I think he doesn't pay sufficient deference to Omohundro.
Okay. I don't remember seeing where Omohundro was cited in the paper. I must have missed it.
It's in a footnote. It's only in a footnote, I think. So yeah, I don't know. This field gives me a kind of there's a kind of vibe in this field, right? It's kind of interesting. Where some of the key players are. It feels a little bit like some fields feel young, and so that there's a question of who the founders are in some sense, and then you get a bit of a sense of people see themselves as kind of protagonists and want to preemptively make sure that it isn't like all the credit doesn't accumulate to one person. I mean, that's kind of happening with Bostrom, right? So at least that's my impression. I mean, Bostrom's book and Bostrom's name are probably the most recognizable ones associated with AI safety, I would say, outside of the community itself. I think, relatively speaking, nobody knows Yudkowsky compared to Bostrom.
Yeah, outside of the particular community.
Inside some philosophical communities and AI safety communities, I think Yudkowsky is probably certainly as well known and maybe more influential, but outside, I think that's the case. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to read two papers like this so closely related. So I don't exactly know what the best way to talk about them is. I mean, given we just talked about Omohundro's paper, it seems pointless to just repeat those bits.
Yeah, I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on the instrumental convergence thesis, and we can focus on the orthogonality thesis, which was not something that I'm aware.
Well, Omohundro kind of says the opposite, right? So that was what I found interesting about this paper was the topic of rationality and how it's treated, which seems to me kind of the crux. And Bostrom's take is kind of opposite to Omohundro's. I think I maybe agree more with Bostrom, but Omohundro is making a strong argument that rationality is a kind of one of these instrumental goals, right? That he doesn't talk about the Dutch book argument, but he's making some argument like that unless you're rational, you're kind of going to be taken advantage of and fail to meet your goals. So rationality is an instrumental goal. And Bostrom's basically, like, he invents this idea of instrumental rationality. I don't know how coherent this is. So I'm a bit skeptical of that aspect of Bostrom's paper, but he says there's a kind of, intelligence is different from rationality, and therefore, our systems, they might be instrumentally rational, but there's no need for them to be completely rational, and therefore you can't make any predictions based on rationality, whereas Omohundro is certainly doing that, right? He's saying, okay, because it's going to be rational, it'll be like this and that.
I didn't get that, but I do think that it is easy to confuse, because when I was reading one of the things he's talking about with the orthogonality thesis, where he sort of says something like these I think they're kind of different types of rationality, or different senses of the word rationality, or people have different things in mind when you say the word rationality. So I thought Bostrom believes, similarly to Omohundro, that an advanced intelligence system will want to behave kind of formally rationally, like it'll be some kind of expected utility maximizer, and it will look out for, it will want to use Bayesian decision theory and things like this. But sometimes,
well, I don't think so.
If people want to,
I mean, okay. I think he was kind of saying something like what I was saying last time in criticizing Omohundro's paper, which was, well, I was saying that the examples of agents we have, namely humans, are very often not rational because there's no real reason for them to be. They not only act under resource constraints, but heuristics are fine most of the time. Any gaps in, I mean, there aren't Dutch bookies walking around asking you to make 1 trillion bets about minutiae in order to catch you out in the long run or something. That just isn't a feature of the world. So the Dutch book argument, you can overstate how strong it is, I think. So I think Bostrom's kind of saying that, and so I agree. So I don't, on the other hand, where is he talking about agents should be Bayesian? Maybe I skipped that part.
I might be not using the right words. Not using the words that he used. I don't have the paper up at the moment, so let me just bring that up. What I was going to say is that he's kind of saying that the goals don't need to be reasonable more than they don't need to be rational or something like that. But maybe that's something different from what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think he's just overall completely skeptical that you can make any arguments whatsoever based on the kind of rationality that Parfit would recognize as real rationality. Maybe he believes that there's a weaker sense in which you can predict the behavior just based on, well, for example, wanting to be efficient technically, right? Use fast algorithms is a kind of rationality, and that he believes in, right? So there's some classes. I don't know how formally he wants to distinguish them, so I'm not sure I really understand the distinction he's trying to make there. But maybe we should focus on orthogonality first, anyway, rather than get into the weeds on that.
Yeah. Okay. Orthogonality thesis. So I wrote on the second board the quote that he gives that is like the definition of this. Intelligence and final goals are orthogonal axes along which possible agents can freely vary. In other words, more or less any level of intelligence could in principle be combined with more or less any final goal. And he's saying more or less here because he lists a few exceptions. And this part of the paper then comprises a couple of different points and counterpoints about this thesis. So I thought it would make sense to kind of just go through those, wander through those different things, I guess. Starting with the counterexamples, I think it's reasonable to rule out counterexamples, sort of, and say like have a definition like this that says more or less any. I think that's fine. I'm happy with that. Although after reading Omohundro's paper, one of the counterexamples is there might be some kind of unstable goals, like if you have a goal that says abandon this goal, or if you have a goal that says become as unintelligent as possible, or like die, or remove yourself from the universe, or if you have a goal that Omohundro gives the example of meta utility, in which case you would not want to preserve your utility function. Something like my utility function is the amount of time that I spend with the utility function, this other utility function. And so then your objective is to rewrite your utility function as quickly as possible. So that's a situation where you maybe can't have that goal with a certain level of intelligence because it's not stable. You would immediately abandon it.
I did wonder about that. Yeah, I was thinking about alcoholism or drug addiction in general. So people are very complicated machines, right? And it's, at least for us, it's quite difficult to maintain across many decades an actually kind of stable psychological landscape. And people, in some sense, often do adopt a short-term goal of basically just tuning out from the broader optimization process they were otherwise engaged in, right? They just kind of want to shut down some parts of their cognition and just quit. You could say that's kind of pathological, but double-digit percentages of the population at any given time are going through that. You could think of it as abnormal, or you could think about it as being just a kind of consequence of a very sophisticated cognition, and maybe an unavoidable consequence of that. So I don't know to what extent we should expect highly developed superintelligence to be psychologically stable and coherent, and to what extent it's like a universal phenomena of, is it just that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know if that example is a straightforward case of something like this kind of stability, but I agree with the point that maybe there's a world in which you build an advanced AI, and then you have to worry about its mental health, because it could have all sorts of imbalances that.
Well, there's a way of putting it that you were using last time or the time before, right? Which is that you have subsystems which have separate kind of representations and sub-goals, and you have to balance them against one another, and often they're in very sharp tension. And that's a kind of inherently unstable process which arises from the complexity of the goal, or the unknowability of the truth, and the need to make approximations, and those approximations not really stitching together very well. It seems to me it could easily be a kind of generic feature of learning systems in very complex environments, right? That internally there's this kind of strife. So,
yeah, well, I would put it like, I've thought a little bit about this recently. I wanted to write something on this, but I don't know if I'm really ready to write it, because I don't have enough knowledge of the different examples that I wanted to cite. But I think there's like a case to be made that in many situations you see this kind of adversarial optimization in order to, so like you have a system that is acting towards some goal, and to achieve that, it's got adversarial components. So examples include in machine learning things like generative adversarial networks, actor-critic architectures in reinforcement learning. Actor-critic architectures in reinforcement learning is also used in theoretical neuroscience models of the human and animal reward systems, taking this out of learning systems to a higher level. You've got psychology. I think my naive model of things like say alcohol dependence or something like that is that it's like different parts of the human brain kind of competing for control over what is from the outside a single self, but you've got divisions of the self, of the psyche, into multiple parts, going back as far as Greek philosophy. Other examples include when you look at governments and you have like checks and balances, separation of powers, different branches of different institutions kind of fighting against each other in order to keep each other honest and aligned, and stop them from abusing power. Anyway, so these are lots of examples of what I would say internally you have systems that are kind of battles between a small number of optimizing systems or something like that. But then in each case, if you zoom out, you just see a single system. And so maybe you could suppose that that's one possibility for an advanced system to have. From the outside, it looks like a coherent system, but on the inside, it's got kind of dueling parts. And then you'd have to worry about things like, what if one part takes over and, what if one part kind of starts to dominate? Then that's going to affect what the outer system does. Yeah.
Cool. Should we come back to orthogonality?
Yes. Okay.
Can you attach a speaker as well so I can use the org cam? Otherwise, the camera just kind of keeps rotating around.
Did I attach this? No. Me. Oh dear. How am I gonna zoom out a little? Okay. Attach a speaker. I can do this. All right. There you go. Sorry. Okay, yeah, back to orthogonality.
What do you think is the case for this? I don't think he actually makes a strong case. He just asks us to believe
that's
this.
right. He kind of says it. I've seen a strong case elsewhere. That's my status on this. I think it is something like, basically, he defines intelligence as the capacity for instrumental reasoning, which is similar to Omohundro's definition. It's something like, can you kind of make plans to achieve your goals, and choose different options, different actions, and find the one that will best achieve your goals. And I think the case for the orthogonality thesis is that for any given goal, you can imagine better or worse ways of achieving it. And you can do this kind of regardless of whether or not the goal is silly or sensible. So for example, if you take paperclip production, if you take tile the universe with paperclips as your goal, there is like a way that you can work towards that. And you could imagine building that into a system that is going to follow those steps. It's going to be like an intelligent agent in the non-silly sort of example that comes to mind, except it would just think, at the end of the day, what I want is more paperclips. And so, it'd be great if we could have a space program so that we can go and get resources from other places in the universe and funnel them towards paperclip production and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that seems to be the case.
Yeah, let me make a counter argument. So I think Adam and I discussed this many years ago. I'm not sure if this is exactly his argument, but I know he doesn't really buy this. I think he's just fundamentally optimistic, or more optimistic than me at least, and that's part of why he doesn't buy it. But here's an argument he might make. Okay, fine. So intelligence and final goals are orthogonal, but suppose your final goal is to tile the universe with paperclips. Well, you're probably going to have to build, to actually sustainably achieve that with a high probability, you may have to build alliances of many different AIs or species. You'll have to plan over long time periods. There will be supernovae and other things getting in your way. And during all that time, you'll have internal optimization loops as part of those instrumental goals. And maybe those sub-optimization loops, like human beings have, sub-optimization loops within evolution, will develop moral systems that are somewhat opposed to the final goal that you started with, and then kind of subvert that final goal. Isn't that in some sense the thing we're worried about in AI safety? So in that case, is it really true that the instrument? I feel like the orthogonality and the instrumental convergence are in some sense opposed a bit. In some sense, I don't know how to express it precisely.
So maybe the model is that you can't necessarily have a unified planetary agent that is entirely aligned on paperclip production. That's maybe the the complaint that that seems a little bit unreasonable to, and if you don't have that, then maybe there's going to be problems with your goal of universal paperclips.
Yeah, I feel like the orthogonality thesis seems to me like a statement about initial conditions, right? So, as an initial condition, you could imagine having, as it says,
Yeah.
an arbitrarily intelligent agent with an arbitrary final goal. But it's not clear to me that this orthogonality is true over long time periods, or
Okay.
or it can be maintained.
Well, if it was an intelligent enough agent, then it would do what it could to prevent rogue sub-optimization processes from tiling the universe with pencil sharpeners instead of paper clips or
Yeah,
whatever.
I think this is a. I don't think this is a strong argument because you could also say that if it was sufficiently intelligent, it would know that dividing itself into many copies is one way to avoid parasites that would otherwise take over the whole system if it was too homogeneous and uniform across many galaxies or whatever. And therefore, the only way to preserve its final goal over the long periods is maybe to divide itself up into somewhat independent cells.
Interesting.
And so on. I mean, who knows? We don't know anything about the space of galaxy-spanning algorithms necessary to achieve, reorganization of matter on the scale of the observable universe. So
Right.
I think
Okay.
it's very arrogant.
So
to
maybe
say
there are
that, like,
actually only some of them or something like that. They have to be sort of the right combination of sort of simple and robust to the kinds of things that actually happen in the process of these systems interacting with the universe and with each other. And maybe there are only actually, maybe it doesn't include human goals, but maybe there are some goals that are stable in that universe when you zoom out far enough. And there are some goals that aren't, and maybe paperclip optimizing isn't one. That's interesting.
yeah, I guess
That
I
seems
guess
interesting.
when I read the orthogonality thesis, it seems true to me. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm expressing these counter arguments, but I'm not sure actually where I sit.
Yeah,
I think it
it's
makes sense to me for like within some bounds, right? I can imagine
yeah,
that filling up the solar system with paper clips at that scale, maybe these concerns don't matter, and I guess I buy the thesis completely.
yeah,
But I think at some point, the we're talking too coarsely about these kinds of issues.
yeah. So the actual resolution that we need is enough to sort of say what's going to happen to us. There's a quote from Yudkowsky that goes, I better get this right. I got it roughly right. I'll paraphrase from memory. The AI doesn't hate you, nor does it love you, but you are made of atoms, and those are atoms that it can use for something else.
Yeah.
And so it's like, are we going to find ourselves in a situation where our existence comes into conflict with the goals of the system? And that doesn't need to happen at that's before the solar system full of paper clips.
Yeah, I feel like actually what Bostrom wants to say here is not quite this. I feel like what he really wants to say is, you might call it the benevolence fallacy, which is
Yes.
the idea that just because it's super smart, it'll be wise and kind and all the things we imagine of the best of our gods and not the worst of our gods. I feel like this is a fancy pants refutation of the benevolence fallacy, which I think is a stronger statement.
I think that's very well put. Yeah, and that is what the counter arguments that he puts into the paper are actually doing that work. They're not doing the work for the orthogonality thesis like we've been talking about. So yeah, that's actually a really helpful way of looking at this. And I guess I'm not a very good judge of those arguments because I come in kind of quite receptive to the benevolence fallacy being a fallacy.
Yeah, I guess temperamentally I'm not inclined to make that mistake or believe it should be automatically benevolent. But I know people who I think would argue otherwise, and when I try and emulate them, it's I don't think I can make an argument for it. It's not impossible that that's the case, right? Simply because maybe there's so much free energy out in space from vacuum fluctuations or something that very quickly you don't care about matter or suns or reorganizing matter, and this is just for level 1 civilizations with kind of dreams of grandeur. So there could be something about the physical universe that just means that very quickly superintelligences don't care about the perceivable universe that we inhabit. So I think it's possible that those kind of arguments exist. I don't think anybody can make them now. So I think that anybody saying this right now seems to me to be convinced by the fallacy. But I'm open to future arguments which would be somewhat along those lines being true with more knowledge.
Yeah. I don't know if I have more to say about the orthogonality thesis. There was a comment that I had here, which was that anthropomorphism seems to be fueling the fallacy. That's what Bostrom seems to be saying, and I think other people I've seen kind of point to that. And that was interesting because when you think about anthropomorphism, it seems like a blessing as much as a curse, or it seems like actually not a blessing, curse. I don't think that's the right word for what I'm thinking. What I'm thinking is, it seems like that's very built into humans. So Dennett has the concept called the intentional stance.
Yeah.
So this idea that thinking of something as an agent is sometimes the right way of thinking about it. I think that's one way to put it. We humans kind of like are hardwired to do that. And I think in the future, it's like inevitable that if AI systems are made and they act in the world in an agentic way, we will be compelled to think of them as agents. And so that was an interesting kind of thought that was spurred by reading about this anthropomorphism stuff.
Yeah, I thought about. I haven't read many of Dennett's books actually, but I read what is it, From Bark to Bacteria? Is that Dennett?
And From Bark to Bacteria and Back. I think that's him. I haven't read it.
Yeah, I get Dennett mixed up with another philosopher quite often. Yeah, I think that's Dennett. Yeah, I should reread that. There's a kind of interesting. Yeah, I can't catch that thread, but he has a section. Sorry, go on.
Go on.
No, I was going to talk about section 1.3 with these methods of predicting.
Oh yeah,
but
yeah. Let me see. I don't think I put that into my notes, but I thought it was interesting how the
I thought it was
the
kind
structure of
of
this paper
yeah.
was
I thought it was strange.
um,
He says there's at least 3 directions, and 2 of them are straw men that he sort of immediately says are stupid, and then he's going to talk about the third one. It doesn't seem like he's really made an attempt for this to be a systematic list, so I don't know really what the point of these three this list is. It's something like, here are things you think, reader, might help to predict superintelligent motivations, but you're wrong, and the only one that might work is 3. So 1 is predictability through design competence, which is smart people build system does thing they want. 2 is predictability through inheritance, copy human, behaves like human then, yes. And 3 is the convergent instrumental one that we've sort of discussed. 2 seems a lot to me like what he discussed later, which is goal content integrity, isn't it? What's the difference between goal content integrity or self-preservation and predictability through inheritance? Are these almost identical?
Maybe this. So we already discussed last week about how there's kind of like a second level on which you can read these papers as advice for humans building AIs, or something like that. And I think this is an instance of that. And we were talking before about this when we were kind of talking about the instrumental convergence stuff. I was thinking this as well. We kind of are in this situation where we're sort of thinking that the alignment problem is so hard, and yet we're also thinking that there's going to be like this intelligence explosion, or there's going to be this super capable system that's able to self-modify itself. But if people who are worried about the alignment problem, people in AI safety, are like thinking, the ideal thing would be to like not build something that's smarter than ourselves that we can't control. Then those people think that they're right. They might also think that a more intelligent agent than them, like an AI agent, was going to know about that, and therefore like not build a smarter agent than itself because it wouldn't be able to control it.
Yeah.
But one way this breaks down is that human values are really complex, and artificial intelligence values might not be so complex. They might actually have a utility function that is like a neural network that they have. Then they have the tensors, and they know what they are. They just need to like not let them be corrupted by they have an explicit utility function that they know where it is. And if you have that, which humans don't, but an AI might, if humans build it with one, that might be kind of easier to preserve. So that's one difference.
Yeah, I find that interesting, and I don't know that it seems to me feels a little old-fashioned already. So if you think about the way that large language models work with prompting, so there's kind of several layers of optimization now, right? There's kind of the foundational optimization where you actually train the big model and you spend $20 million and then it's trained. And then there's this kind of in-context learning where the model configures itself based on some part of the prompt and then starts the problem. Now, that part is much more like the condition that we're in, right? So we don't know where our weights came from, so to speak. It's inaccessible to us. We can maybe introspect a little bit, something like the in-context learning that's happening, and that's the level at which we understand our own utility function. I don't know why. Is it so clear that ultimately we will specify utility functions at the level of the loss versus this in-context learning kind of level? Because,
right.
I mean, if you think about the way people talk about getting AIs to learn human preferences, it's more like the latter, right? So it seems much more likely that we'll train a system on all of the internet, but it doesn't have any goals or agent-like behavior. And then we'll just try and talk to it at the like in context learning level and be like, hey, humans, they're good, be nice to them, do some other things. Because how else is it going to map those human level preferences onto those fundamental degrees of freedom? We can't specify those things, right? We have no idea how to specify them. It's about as hard as specifying the mapping from pixels to labels, cats and dogs. So I don't really buy the idea that we'll ever encode control or human preferences as utility functions. This is a dream from before deep learning started working. This is not the sort of thing we can do. But we could specify it at that higher level, in which case, isn't it the case that the system will be kind of in the same condition we're in, where it has a very contradictory, complex relationship to its goal function?
That's quite interesting. So I'm going to try and draw a picture. I don't know if that's going to help on the next board. I don't have a plan for the picture, so it's not really going to work.
I've got high expectations based on the last picture.
Okay. Oh dear. I shouldn't have drawn it. I had time for that one, and I had a plan. This is a. I'm not going to draw a picture. I'm just going to.
Oh no!
This is the lost function. No. This was going to be the picture all along. This is the loss function, and we run it on some GPUs, and there's like data coming in, and it's tuning the model parameters. And then what you're saying is there's some layers of abstraction above this, and then there's like the mind of the language model which you can converse with, and this level you can kind of it's much more like a psyche. You can kind of maybe we can figure out a way so that it will sort of be an agent, and we can communicate with it, and it can do things in the world, and then maybe we can like convince it to do things for us. So the alignment people are like, you better watch out for what goals you put into the AI because it will pursue them. But what we're saying is that, are you talking about the goals at this level? Because there's maybe like goals here that are these in context, these vague, these higher level things that kind of correspond to conscious goals or something like that. But then there's goals down here. The loss function is the goal down here, which is kind of much simpler. It's just like predict the next word, or whatever the slight generalization is that enables this to hypothetically become generally intelligent. So we can think about like an alignment problem in each case, and like superintelligence in each case. So, but maybe it starts to look a little bit silly. I don't know. So if you focus down here for a bit, the loss function, predicting the words, the doomsday scenario is that the AI wants to be the best at predicting words that come into it online. Like it's not just like it has a fixed data set and it wants to predict those words. You've like plugged it into to an online learning setting where it's getting continual data from the internet or something like that.
So it just forbids all words other than and institutes a police state that makes people only say and type and forever and ever.
That's right. Yeah, something like that. Some doomsday scenario like that. There are many examples you can think of. But anyway, it rigs the system so that it ends up getting hacking this goal. It's not what we wanted it to do, but it maximizes the loss function. Is that what failure looks like, or does failure look like up here? We've kind of created Caligula, with thousands of times as much brain power, and it kind of goes on a rampage. And this one up here, I can think that it wouldn't know maybe what's going on in between the levels. It might not be able to see through these levels of abstraction, the relationship between its weights and its Caligula. I like it. All right. I was wondering what was going to be the pun because I thought he's not just writing Caligula. Very good. Yeah. Anyway, but this one might not be able to see all the way down to the low level stuff, and so it might have like a complex goal complex that is kind of emergent out of the lower level stuff. And then maybe then it's in a similar situation to us. I would buy that.
I don't know what situation it's in, but it's a harder thing to. It may be at least as complex as our condition, but it could be very different and very alien still, right? I'm not saying it'll be like us, but it's probably as unlike the lower level concern as our issues are. So I feel like maybe it's worth. Maybe this is understudied. I think maybe there's a lot of people in AI safety that haven't quite caught up to where the things seem to be going, right? Which is much more like this in context learning. Maybe there will be 3 levels soon, right? It's like in context learning. The context gets longer and longer, and then there's in context learning or something. I mean, who knows? It's certainly not going to stand still.
This is something that is so. I think it's so understudied. I think basically, I mean, I don't want to say that people aren't aware of this, because what's probably the case is that people are aware of this. They just like don't have, they just haven't written about it, or they have written about it and I haven't seen it, or they don't know how to write about it because it's kind of vague. But like intelligent agents is not this is a really hard thing to like draw a box around something and say, that's it. That's the intelligent agent. I mean, we were talking before about how some things, apologies for the noise.
It's an agent.
Yeah, that's one over there. Or is the avatar on Roblox an agent, and it's just multiple agents on the inside, and it only appears as one agent from the outside, which is my point. But then you've got like, there are some senses in which you can think of, maybe it's not the best way to think of it, but you can think of like individual cells as agents. You can think of different parts of the psyche, which might correspond to different subsystems in the brain, as agents. And maybe you can think of the whole human as an agent. That's where we normally start. And then you can think of firms or nations as agents. And maybe you can think of society as like some kind of collective intelligence. There's like hierarchies of these things. And this picture on the board might end up being something similar. And then when you were saying, oh, there might be 3 layers soon, I'm just thinking something like, well, what if there was a collective of these models interacting with each other, and that had some properties from the outside, and it was like some kind of network of interactions on the inside. There are sort of multiple different levels you can look at, and at each level you have the possibility of describing things going on as agents interacting, or maybe it's better described in some other way. I haven't really seen that sort of ecosystem and hierarchy, hierarchical ecosystems kind of perspective very much, but I think that's sometimes important.
Michael Jordan has written a bit about that, but not from a safety perspective, I believe. I think he's been working. I mean, there was a keynote speech at ICLR last year, I guess, on that topic. Yeah, I guess you could say that the safety literature is concerned with just pointing out at least one way this could go wrong, right? Which is, this base level with a loss function, paper clips. Okay, so be cautious, be humble about powerful systems and optimizing them. And then maybe they would say, fine. There are many other levels at which this problem could manifest itself in a million different ways, and nobody's saying otherwise. But when it comes to actually raising the alarm is one thing, finding solutions is another thing, and finding solutions, it seems like you have to pay attention to the level at which the goals are likely to be specified in practice.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. I was going to say, because like the alignment problem is often framed as like a problem that someone can go and work on, and the problem is you have one agent and one human who is also an agent and has a goal, and that's a coherent concept, and you have to make the agent do what the human wants. You have to make the agent achieve the human's goal, and that might not be what we actually need a technical solution to. If this problem arises in other places, some people, this distinction is certainly in the community already, because people talk about different types of alignment problem. There's the single alignment problem, which is a single human and a single agent, and then there's a single multi-single, and multi alignment problem. And then I think the most work has been done on the single, but there's at least the recognition that the other ones exist and are important.
Yep.
But yeah, I wonder if there's also like multi-layer, multi, or something like that.
I guess probably I'd like to wrap this up around an hour today, so maybe we can... I haven't read the conclusion, so maybe let's take a bit of a look at that. I'll just read the first paragraph unless you object. The orthogonality thesis suggests that we cannot blithely assume that a superintelligence will necessarily share any of the final values stereotypically associated with wisdom and intellectual development in humans. Scientific curiosity, benevolent concern for others, spiritual enlightenment and contemplation, renunciation of material acquisitiveness, a taste for refined culture, and so forth. It might be possible through deliberate effort to construct a superintelligence that values such things, or to build one that values human welfare, moral goodness, or any other complex purpose that its designers might want it to serve. But it is no less possible, and probably technically easier, to build a superintelligence that places final value on nothing but calculating the decimals of pi. Yeah, this, I feel like, is the strong part of the argument, so I think that's...
yeah, I think I agree.
And on that count, I think I give him a pass for copying Omohundro, because this is such an important thing that 1,000 people saying it is not a bad idea, even if they're very similar.
Yeah. I think, for what it's worth, it does credit Omohundro more prominently in superintelligence. I remember when I read it that I got the clear impression that this work on instrumental convergence had first come through Omohundro, and then this paper, and now was a chapter in this book. So maybe it wasn't fully clear on the relation or something at the time of writing this paper or something. I don't know. Anyway, I'm also fine to wrap up at 10. Thanks. It's been a very interesting discussion.
Yeah. Thanks, man.